Happy Easter! Welcome to our Summerlin Church video for Easter 2020, this bewildering Easter that it's been. I'm glad you're here. My name is David Mosgofian Koeker. I serve our team at Summerlin as the associate pastor. Bart's talk is awesome. Kathleen has prepared great worship music. I hope you love it. This video is also connected to a couple of other videos from Holy Week. There's a Maundy Thursday video and a Good Friday video, and I invite you to watch those as well. Our church is dedicated to learning to live and to love more like Jesus lived and loved, and I hope that this video invites you deeper into the love of Jesus. Celebrating Easter this year is unlike any other time we've celebrated it. It's not about gathering or decorating the church with Easter lilies or food afterwards. And with all that's been taken away, it's allowed me to focus more fully on what Easter is actually about. It's about experiencing the love of God through the life of Jesus Christ. My hope is that this Easter, wherever you are, you experience God's love richly and fully. And there is nothing, there's no barrier that stands between you and God's love. At our little church, as I've been calling around, I know that we're keeping one another in prayer. I invite you to keep doing that. The work of our church is also ongoing, so I invite you to continue giving to our church. All donations are one of two ways now, either online through our donation link, which is up at the top of our website, or you can mail in a check, and our mailing address is down at the bottom of our website. Thanks in advance for those gifts. Those allow us to continue to serve the community in all the ways that we do. My prayer for you in this time is that you know God's love fully, richly, and you are experience the celebration of being risen up in the love of Jesus Christ.
Good morning, church family. I'm so sorry we can't worship together today, especially today, a day of celebration, and usually the most beautiful songs of the whole year, maybe rivaled only by Christmas Eve, I suppose. We are going to sing Jesus Christ is Risen Today. So before I do, press pause and go find the lyrics, because I think we should all be singing it this morning. I'm going to do my best. It's really hard to sing this song without a congregation, but I'll do my best. And you guys do your best from your own homes, and we will all worship the Lord together. It's certainly a day of rejoicing. Christ the Lord is risen today. Hallelujah. Sons of men and angels sing. Hallelujah. Raise your joys and triumph high. Hallelujah. Sing ye heavens and earth reply. Lives again our glorious King. Hallelujah. Wherein death is now
Welcome to our Summerlin community, online community. Normally we gather in our church building, but right now this is our church building, and we're glad that you're with us, whether it's from afar or whether it's from our local area in Summerlin, California. And I want to share some thoughts with you about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the greatest event in the history of the world. I love to read, as many of you know. I love to read stories. I love to read biographies. And one of my favorite techniques that writers use is when they have a story lodged within another story. Sometimes a story within a story within a story. It's a great technique because you get lost in the big story, and then you start getting into the smaller stories, and they become big stories. And it's just a tremendous way to share a story. And the story of the resurrection of Jesus is stories within stories within stories. And I'd like to look at two stories within stories, and at the end hint about a third one as well. There's the big story, and that's where I'd like to start, and then I'd like to move down to a little smaller story. Not smaller as in less important, but just one that is lodged within the larger one. The big story we left off, if you've been listening throughout Holy Week, it started on Palm Sunday when Jesus came into town and people were cheering for him. And even though he knew where he was headed, he experienced a moment of joy amongst the people. And I talked about how even in the midst of a situation where we see suffering and a cross in front of us, we can still live in the present and experience joy. And then we looked at Maundy Thursday, which is Commandment Thursday, really, or Holy Thursday, the Last Supper, when Jesus gathered with his best friends around a real meal and shared some amazing truths. He washed their feet to show them that they should serve one another. And he talked about how he was the vine and they were the branches. That's where they would find their identity, was by staying rooted in him. That's how we find our identity. And then he talked about the new commandment that he gave them that night. As a Jewish rabbi, this was huge. This was like Moses is the man who gives commandments, or at least God through Moses. And Jesus said, I have a new commandment, and it's all about love. It's loving one another the way I've loved you. That's the mark of a person who's my follower. Not are their doctrines right, or are they thinking perfectly, or are they morally, exacting. No, it's that they love well. So that night we left it as he was being betrayed, as he was heading into his suffering on Good Friday, and we picked the story up there. And we talked about redemptive suffering, that suffering it can be meaningful, can even be, when let go of, when put into the hands of God, that kind of suffering can be for the whole world. And that's what Jesus did. He identified with all our brokenness, with all the pain we could possibly experience, psychological, emotional, physical, the confusion, all of that. When he came to this earth, he took on all of that to tell us how much he loved us, and that we can do that for others. We can take on their pain, not in an unhealthy way, but in an empathetic and caring way, and to be redemptive in our suffering and in the suffering of others. And so that's where we left it. He had been crucified, and then he was put in a tomb, and it was just horrendous experience for his followers. They were confused, they were despairing, they were scared, they were embarrassed. They'd staked their lives on this guy, on all his teachings, and here he was, not only dead, but killed by these outsiders, these Romans, and killed in such a shameful way. The cross was humiliating and was meant to be humiliating. And they were worried, they were scared, they were traumatized, and they were in hiding. That's where we find them next in the story. The male disciples of Jesus are hiding, and it's understandable why. Their leader had been killed, and they, I'm sure, were worried that folks were coming after them. You could say paranoid, but not really. It was a very real possibility, and it said they were behind locked doors. And the ones who went to the tomb were the women disciples of Jesus. Many people don't realize Jesus had women disciples. They think only of the 12 apostles. He had many, many, many disciples, maybe hundreds. But out of those many, many, he chose 12 apostles. And then there were these women who were following him. If you want to look it up, it's in Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. He says there was Mary, and there was Joanna, and there was Susanna, and there were many others who followed him from village to village. And that was in the greater part of his ministry. These women were with him. So don't picture Jesus with 12 guys always following him. It was a larger group of men and women, which was radical in its own time. It was a new community where men and women had this equal and amazing role to play. And if you don't believe that, the first witnesses of his resurrection were women. And there are various groupings of them in the scriptures that came to his tomb. But one, of course, was Mary of Magdala. And she came with several others. And they went there asking the question, who will roll away the stone? In those days, they were like, tombs were like caves, and they'd have a rut in the front of them. And a big, picture of millstone would be rolled into this rut, and bam, it'd come down. They were trying to keep people out of the tomb, body robbers, corpse robbers. They weren't thinking somebody would come out of the tomb. They were trying to keep people from the outside from going in, and they knew there was this heavy rock, and there were Roman guards. It says a guard, but it's actually a word that means a number of Roman guards. Some have said as many as 16. That were guarding the tomb to make sure his disciples didn't come and steal the body and say, oh, look, he's raised himself from the dead or something. Because they knew he'd said things like that. And so these women are going early in the morning before dawn or right at dawn, and they're saying, who's going to roll away the stone? How are we going to find his body to anoint it with the spices and things that we need to do for our customs? They get there, of course, and the stone is rolled away. They encounter angels who say to them, why are you looking for the living among the dead? He's not here, he's risen. That was the crack that opened the world. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? He is not here. He's not in a tomb. Nothing could encase him. Nothing could hold him. His love is a deathless love. It overcomes, it surmounts, it's inexorable. Nothing can keep it encapsulated in this tomb. Not guards. Actually, the guards ran away when they saw Jesus come out. They'd never seen anything quite like that. And the stone rolled over couldn't keep him in. Nothing could keep him in. And that's the big story. That's the story, that there is a deathless love in God that overcomes even death. That things will be put right in the big story, in the right time and in the right way. Every tear will be wiped away from every eye that's ever cried. And as Julian of Norwich, said in her visions of Jesus Christ as she prayed day after day, at the end of them she said, and I was shown that all shall be well. All shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. That's the big story. It shall be well. But now I want to look at a story within the story that happened a short time before the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He had these dear, dear friends. They were siblings, Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And he went to their house on some occasions, and he just enjoyed them so much. And there's so many stories within that's the Mary and Martha, where Martha's saying, Lord, tell Mary to quit just sitting at your feet and listening, and tell her to get in the kitchen and help me out. And Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you're worried about so many things. You must be a number 1 on the Enneagram. No, just kidding. He didn't say that. But you're so worried, and Mary has chosen the one necessary thing, sitting at Jesus' feet. That's the one necessary thing, and it will not be taken from her. It was that family. And while Jesus was away, Lazarus got sick, and he died. And Jesus knew in his spirit that he had died. And people came and told him, your friend has died, or your friend is sick, they said. Come and heal him. And Jesus tarried, waited several days, and nobody could figure out why he was waiting. And when he finally got to the home of Lazarus, he was already dead, and he was in the tomb. And there was weeping, and there was wailing. And the two sisters in various ways are saying, Lord, why couldn't you have been here? Why you could have made this not happen. You could have healed him. That's what they were intimating. And Jesus goes up to the tomb, not a tomb unlike the one he would be in shortly. And he says, roll away the stone. The story within the story of this grieving family. Jesus is still alive. Their dear brother has just died. Probably their only means of finances, so it was a larger issue. They rolled it away. In fact, the women sort of said, Lord, don't you know how long he's been in there? This isn't a good idea. He says, roll the stone away. And Jesus wept there. He wept. He wept for the death of his friend. He ennobled grieving. He let us know that it's okay to grieve. Death is something worth grieving about, even if in the larger story it will be swallowed up by life. They rolled the stone away from Lazarus' tomb, and Jesus stood there in front, and he called out in a loud voice, and he said by name, Lazarus, come out. And you can imagine the people maybe a little embarrassed, like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to work. I mean, he's making a fool of himself. And then they hear scuffling inside the tomb. And from the darkness coming out toward the light, they see this virtual mummy, because they would wrap people in linen cloths when they died. And he comes shuffling out. It's probably kind of hard to do. He's shuffling out into the light, and the people go crazy. They don't know what's happened. And Jesus so kindly, so sweetly, so practically says, unwrap him. Unwrap his grave clothes. And they unwrapped his grave clothes, and he was alive. Now, the story within the story, Lazarus was really less of a resurrection in the fullest sense of the word, more about resuscitation in the sense that he had to die again. I mean, he died again. Jesus did not. Jesus ascended. Jesus disappeared into the next realm. But Lazarus was raised for a reason. And I think at the very least, that story within the story of the resurrection of Jesus Christ is our story. It's your story. It's my story. Because we all live in some tombs. Like the disciples, we all go into hiding, and sometimes that hiding gets a bit musty and dark and can even turn into a tomb, and the rock can be rolled in front and we can't get out. And we wrap ourselves, or others wrap us in grave clothes. They may be the grave clothes of fear. They may be the grave clothes of worry, or of addiction, or of anger, or of grudges that you hold, or of regretting the past, or being embittered by the past, or being afraid of the future. There are so many things that can entrap us. Messages from our childhood: you aren't good enough, you aren't enough, you're not big enough, you're not funny enough, you're not beautiful enough. We can be trapped, encased, entombed really by these things. And God is out in front of this tomb calling out to each of us. Bart, Linda, Sarah, whoever you are, you put your name in here. John, Chewy, Jawahar, whatever your name is, Diane, come out. And then he's saying to those of your friends, unwrap her, unwrap him. Take Bart out of his grave clothes, out of those false things that he's thought about himself. And one by one, we're meant to come out of the tomb that sometimes we've made for ourselves. Other times, others have made it for us. But all of that is within the ultimate healing. There is this, I don't even want to say mini healing, because it's not smaller. It's like a smaller stream that's going out into a larger river. The larger river is the assurance that death is swallowed up in victory, that nothing can hold Jesus Christ, and therefore death cannot hold those of us who have chosen to follow him. And I think ultimately there's going to be great surprises about how vast and encompassing his forgiveness and love are. That's the big story. All shall be well. But within it, there's our story. There's your story. There's a call coming to us to come out of our hiding. And that means we've got to let go of some things. We've got to, first of all, hear the voice. We've got to grow uncomfortable enough with living in the tomb of our own making that we decide we want something else. It's the mystery of human transformation. Why does somebody, let's take addiction, for example, stay addicted for so long and then one day wake up and say, I'm sick to death of being sick to death. I need help. And they go to AA, or they go to a recovery program, or they go to the Salvation Army or the Rescue Mission or wherever it is. And they're healed often. Often they're brought out of their tomb. Well, but why did it take that long? I asked a man this one time. I was speaking at a Salvation Army retreat, and there's a gentleman there, a Salvation Army officer, great big man, African-American gentleman. And we were sitting next to each other at lunch, and literally his shoulders were here. I'm a fairly small person, and this is a very large person. And I'll call him George. I said, George, tell me your story. And he told me a story of horror, of addiction and prisons, and 9 different prisons he'd been in and out and back. And here he was with joy in his face, caring for other people, helping people find new life. And I felt a little odd asking this question, but he was so full of joy. Even though he's an intimidating looking person, I said, George, can I ask you a question? I don't mean it to be impertinent, but why did it take you 9 prisons to have this awakening? Why 9? And he laughed, this big old laugh, and he said, I've asked myself that 100 times. He said, and then he paused and he kind of thought. And he said, Bart, I don't know. I guess for me, it just took 9. All of us are in some kind of tomb, some kind of prison, some kind of grave clothes that are keeping us from experiencing the fullness of life. Maybe this is your time. Maybe you've been in 9 prisons and it's time to say, I'm coming out. I'm coming out of this prison. I'm walking toward the light, even if I have to limp toward it. So let me give you a couple of steps if that's the situation you're in. First of all, look around. Look around at your tomb. How is it going? Look at it clearly. Look at your grave clothes. Look at the things that are holding you back. Reassess. One thing about this situation we're in now, this pandemic, is I think it's given all of us a chance to reassess, to rethink. By the way, that's what the word repentance means. It doesn't mean quit doing bad things and start doing good things. It means rethink your situation. And I think we're all being given a chance to do that right now. So look around at your life and rethink it. And look at the things that are holding you in and keeping you from the love and the life and the forgiveness and the fresh start that you long for. What are those things? And then let them go, which is so much easier said than done, because we get addicted to what's natural for us right now. We get addicted to what we're accustomed to. And there are things we have to just let go of. Sometimes we have to just cut them loose. Look around, let go, and then listen. And some of these can be in different orders. Sometimes it's listen first so that you can look around. Listen first to the call of the God of love so that you can let go. You may need the help letting go. In fact, I think we all do. I love the 12-step program where it basically says that we're powerless to help ourselves, and unless a higher power, God, helps us, we don't have a chance of being restored to sanity. And by the way, living in a way that isn't your true life is insanity. It makes no sense. You're meant to live your life, who you were truly meant to be. And for that, you have to be freed from some things. So look around, let go, listen, and then limp toward the light. Most of us are kind of got enough grave clothes around us that if we're trying to move toward the light or toward the voice, we're going to have to kind of limp to get there. Well, then limp to get there. Crawl to get there if you have to. Just start moving in that direction. And then look around, and you're going to find some others who will help unwrap your grave clothes. You're not alone. People have been through this before. People have experienced this awakening within the larger awakening, the story within the story. And they can help you unwrap those grave clothes and come out into the light. So there's two awakenings. The one is the great one that Jesus Christ demonstrated, where all will be someday put to right because he has conquered it all. The God of love embodied in Jesus Christ, experienced through the Holy Spirit. That God of love cannot be stopped, cannot be thwarted. And that's the good news. That's the big story. But within it is your story. And you're being called to come out into the light, to experience that forgiveness. How does it happen? It happens a million different ways. For me, it happened when I turned my life over to Jesus Christ at age 17 as a young atheist. And I just felt that calling. I don't know why I felt it. It was something I can't quite explain. And I let go of obviously my ideology, which at the time was atheism. And I embraced the love that was embracing me. I experienced that deathless love as a little 17-year-old in Mount Prospect, Illinois. Now, all these years later, 55 years later or something like that, I still experience that. Sometimes I wander back into the tomb. That's a sad part. Sometimes I go back to sleep and dream a dream that's false and live a life that isn't mine. But wouldn't it be tragic if you got to the end of your life and found out you'd never really showed up in it? That you'd failed at the one thing you had to do, which was to show up in your own life. You don't have to be anybody else. You don't have to be me. You don't have to be Billy Graham. You don't have to be Mother Teresa or Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. You have to be you. You are the one God created to be you. But you have to let go of the more false versions of yourself and be awakened into this love, into this self-forgetful love that allows you to love others the way Jesus would love them through you if he had your life to do it through. And he's meant to have your life to do it through. May you experience that awakening, your own awakening, within the greater awakening this Easter Sunday.
I will turn my ear
And now may the love of God, God our Father, which sent Jesus Christ to this earth to manifest his forgiveness, his care, his welcome to everyone. May this love, through the Father, the Son, and the manifest experience of the Holy Spirit, be yours now as he calls you forth out of your own tomb and into his glorious light, the light of the resurrection. Amen.